Hello and welcome to another episode of Brave TV. I'm Jennifer Marshall, the Executive Director of This Is My Brave, and I'm so glad that you are tuning in. The main concept of Brave TV is to bring stories of hope and recovery into the audiences, the homes of our audience during the COVID pandemic. And we are so thrilled to have the women from two of the founders of Black Mental Wellness with us today. And I also have my program manager, Erin Gallagher, with us. And we are going to launch right into intros so that you can meet Dr. Busby and Dr. Cammack. So ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Who wants to start?
I'll go. So I am Dr. Nicole Cammack. I am a licensed clinical psychologist and president and CEO of Black Mental Wellness. What information do you want in the intro?
Tell us about how let's go to Danielle and we'll do an intro real quick. And then I want to hear about how you ladies formed this incredible partnership.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Busby. I am a licensed clinical psychologist in Michigan and in the state of Texas, where I currently reside. And I am the public relations chair for Black Mental Wellness and also a co-founder.
And Erin, say hi.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a program manager with This Is My Brave. So I work with, the varying shows. When we were putting on live shows, I would work with producers, the local producers who would be our boots on the ground in the cities where the shows are being produced. We would coordinate. I stay here until it's time to go out for the show. They do all the hard work in the city. So I work alongside them just to keep things going right up to the show. And then I help with other things like this, fun other initiatives that we're doing.
So ladies, tell us, how did this, because you have two other co-founders.
Yes.
So tell us about how you all got together and got started.
Well, it started with an idea based on a need. So just working with being in the therapy room and seeing the need for more diverse staff and being able to really get the information to clients, Black clients, because I would try to explain certain things. For example, like, oh, you may experience depression differently. So when you're talking about irritability or pain or those feelings of hopelessness, that's depression. And not just what we see on TV when it's like, oh, I'm crying and eating ice cream and all of those things, and really wanting the information, but not having a place to get it. So I wanted to give them, like, I just want you to read this information and then tell me what you think. And honestly, I couldn't find it. So I had started giving out like Essence magazine articles and just say, I know this is a magazine, but this information right here is really good. And so the idea came about of, if it's not out there, how about we create it? And so I reached out to colleagues from graduate school and postdoctoral fellowship, and then the magic happened, and here we are.
And when did you officially come together?
Our first meeting was the fall of 2017. So I started like really thinking it through in 2016. I reached out to them. They were all like on board. And it was really important to have people who also share that passion and wanting to, like both in their career, their education and things like that. And so when I talked to each of them, they were all like equally excited. And we had our first meeting in the fall of 2017. We got together in person for the first time because people were all over. In March of 2018, Danielle drove through a storm. It was like an unexpected, never happened in DC, like windstorm. All the flights were canceled. And it was like, there is no way. She drove from Michigan to Maryland to be a part of that. And that's when I knew we had something special.
Oh my God, you brought back so many memories on that one. Because I remember we were looking at flights and I was like, forget it. I'm just going to drive. And I knew that drive well because I did graduate school in DC, but I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. And so I was just like, all right, 9 hours, we can do it. But I wanted to just add to what Nicole said, in that I think for me, when like around the time that Nicole reached out, just prior, I think over time I had seen in the therapy room that a lot of times when my patients that were Black came in, it was oftentimes way later or at a greater severity and symptoms. When I looked at it just anecdotally, like compared to other patients. And then when I started to research and find that there was data that supported that this was actually, we knew that this consistently happens. And that's just like an example of a specific disparity that exists when we look across races. And I just felt frustrated by that experience of like, wow, if you had came in sooner, we could have a whole different prognosis. And it was also frustrating that I was in a space where we were constantly seeing it happen. And I knew I was working with researchers that knew this was happening. And I just felt from a systematic position, as providers, we needed to do more. And we always talk about meeting a patient where they are in the therapy room. But I think as a system, we need to meet communities where they are too. And so that was just something I was very passionate about. I had wrote it out on a vision board for that year. I remember just like, I need to do something about this big issue. And so I don't even know how Nicole and I started discussing this. It was in casual conversation, and then it just kind of grew and then agreed. Like I knew we had something special that first meeting, but also like our retreats, but just also when we really were able to organize and stay organized on this mission.
So your website is full. What I love is it's just clickable, the PDFs with just all the information. It's just so clear and really helpful. And so was that originally what we're just going to build a website that has resources and that's relatable? We can get it out there, put it in the hands of the people who need it. Was it originally just going to be an online resource?
That makes me so happy to hear you say, because that website and getting that information was hard.
So good.
Work.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
And there was the motivating factor was, how do we get this information to the everyday person, but also something that any provider can use in session with their client. So, we always are looking for resources. And so it's really easy to print off a PDF and say, work through this, or here are some ways that you can use this strategy. Here are some resources. Even for myself, like a colleague came to me and she's like, oh, I used your book recommendations with a veteran. And I'm like, why am I not doing that? So I started printing it off and sort of being able to get it into the hands of the people who could benefit from it. So we did want to provide the resources, but we always had, like, even from the beginning, the first conceptualizations of our organization was about information is one piece on that website. We need to collaborate with other people in the field just to show like there's a wealth of ways that we can address mental health. It doesn't all have to be a psychologist, a social worker, a psychiatrist, but what about yoga instructors, or thinking about nutrition, or even now with us doing like art and mental health, like just thinking of all the ways, clergy. And then we always wanted to do work in the community. So both being able to bring programs and workshops to the community.
Mm-hmm.
So you are doing that now. You have the workshops. I saw some of those on, and those are happening around the country, or is that typically just in the DC area?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Okay.
Yeah, and that could be corporations. So if you need us to come in and kind of work with your company in a particular way or on a particular set of issues, that can be in a community, that can be in schools. It's really taken its own form, honestly. Like when people reach out, we are able to really brainstorm, what are your needs? What, areas of expertise do we have that do or don't fit that? So it's been cool.
Our first, like, in the community thing though, Danielle, like Saturdays in the D meant a lot to us. So we went to, maybe Danielle shall explain since it's
yeah. So I'm originally from Detroit, you are. So of course Saturdays in the D had a really special place in my heart, but it was specific to students K through 12. So we were working with the little ones, so our 5-year-olds all the way up to our high school students. They were able to come do a Saturday enrichment program basically. So it was a ton of different activities that the students could pick from. It was free for the students that registered, and we were a primary component where they wanted to make us a part of the actual curriculum. So not like a something you add on, but really trying to take on, if we teach these skills early and we teach these skills as a very normal part of, a child's learning and a child's development, they'll be better equipped if a stressor does come along, right? And a lot of these youth, unfortunately, are in situations and experiences where they're just like statistically exposed to higher rates of violence or higher rates of other stressors that we know. impact them differently. So I thought that was such a cool experience because we were able to come in and teach coping strategies. We were able to come in and help the kids identify, like, where in my body am I experiencing a particular emotion? And like, huge. What do I do about it? Yeah. So
we just did an episode of, we do a weekly yoga flow with one of our alumni, and we brought in our kids. So it was myself and her, and then she's in Boston, and she has a little one about 8 and my daughter 9. And we sat them down and she did that exercise, Danielle, where she said, we're going to take a breath and we're going to feel, where do we feel that pain or stress in our body, and identify it. And then she did this thing where you kind of breathe in and you and then let it out and do the release. And it teaching kids at a young age, we are hoping to go younger and younger too. We launched a high school initiative last year, a college initiative, but that's where it starts, is when they're 5, 6, 7. They're never too young, I don't think, to talk about mental health.
Yeah, and help them bring awareness, right? Like, all that is saying, like, become aware that your feelings can sit in places in your body. And then the sooner you become aware, the sooner you can intervene or do something about it if it's needed. So that's awesome that you guys.
So is that the Trails program? Is that the Saturday and the D? Are those two different, the same thing? Sorry.
So Saturdays and the D, I think, is separate. I don't know do you know what she's referring to?
It's in Detroit with the public schools.
Okay.
But something about taking research into the lives of students, maybe something.
Everything I can imagine. I think it's actually connected to the University of Michigan.
Okay.
And everything there has an acronym. I actually used it. And so, like, when you started to go, I'm like, I don't even know but I'm familiar. I thought you were talking about something specific to Black mental wellness, but I am familiar with that program just because I'm from the area. And no, this is separate. They kind of out to us in a different entity, but that is a program that's connected to U of M, and I think they do a ton of research related to schools.
It sounded similar.
Trauma exposure, I believe, but I don't know. Let me not.
But I love that you're starting with kindergartners and first graders. I mean, then we talk about all the time wanting to normalize the conversation about mental health and mental illness, and that certainly is a great way to do it. It's just make it a part of your ongoing conversations.
Yeah, I really applauded the city of Detroit, which is a major funder of this initiative, the mayor's office. I really applauded them for kind of being really intentional about not making it an add-on, not making it an elective, but making something that was integrated within the larger curriculum.
Cool.
So given that you're all in different areas of the country, and when COVID hit, how did you have to shift? And I'm assuming many things just went completely telehealth. Was that how did it go for you all?
So for us, I think there were some things we couldn't do. So maybe programs and collaborations that we initially had. So remember, we were looking at flights, Danielle, in the beginning about going to Detroit. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to take a flight.
I'm waiting for the confirmation, but they were feeling like we didn't know too. So
yes, yeah. And I think, but what I do think happened in this time for us, particularly since we're all over anyway, just adapting to being able to do things virtually. And then as time has gone on, I think it's actually opened our eyes to, wow, we can reach more people. We're not limited to travel restrictions or, something being in a different place. We're able to get on these virtual platforms. We've done trainings with different corporations. We've been on webinar panels. We've been in conferences. We actually launched our shirt line, like something that we were like holding on to since last fall. It was just like, we have the time now. So I think that we were able to think of ways to connect and then still get the message out virtually.
Mm-hmm. Tell us more about the shirts.
Yeah, so that's like my baby too. I have different things that mean a lot to me. But the shirts were really we launched a line called Authentically Me, and we wanted to really have share who we are. So for so long on social media, even on our profile picture, it was just a logo. We never had ourselves on there because we wanted the message to be about mental health. And then it was oh, it's also important that they see the diversity of mental health providers and who we are in this organization. So we added a picture, which was a step. But then it was like, how do we share our story? And maybe by hearing that story, you can inspire someone else. A lot of times you may see someone in these higher up positions and think their life is so different from mine. And I think it was the first time that we shared pieces of us that showed like the true journey that we all took and that we're still on. So we got together and said each person, there are 4 team members, so myself, Danielle, Jessica Henry, and Dana Cunningham. And we all got together and said we need to pick a word or phrases that either describe some part of us, some part of your journey, something that means a lot to you and that expresses your story. And that's what we came up with. So each of us, my word was resilient. Danielle's was get over it. And she crossed that through and put work
Deal
through
with it.
Deal with it. Yeah, so I'm like, wait, Dana has my piece is more important. And then Jessica picked pain, passion, purpose, how she used her pain towards her passion and her purpose now.
That is so awesome. And people can buy them on your site to support. Yeah. Awesome.
So we have them on our site, and they can purchase blackmentalwellness.com and go to the shop there. And yes.
Awesome. Awesome. So can we talk more about stigma a little bit? Because I think that that's something, you know, all of us face in the mental health community, but a little differently in the Black community. Can you describe a little bit more about, we talked about how that is a disparity, that maybe they don't seek treatment until many years later because of that stigma. What would you say your organization has done to kind of address that?
I think that
can we define it first, just so we know what we're talking about? I mean, would you say that we talk about stigma as like a barrier to seeking help, but what is the stigma essentially that you see in the Black community?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And I think I definitely agree with what you stated first, in the sense that all communities are definitely experiencing stigma, but I think it's important to understand the kind of like the why behind certain pieces of it. And I think some major reasons within the Black community, one that I often hear is just kind of grounded in this history of historically, we're just a group of people that have overcome a lot of difficult things and are often given a lot of difficult situations. And so it may be this idea that we're supposed to, like the stereotypical idea of being strong, or the stereotypical idea of like, oh, we can take more, or our pain threshold is just so much higher. And that's false, right? Like, we're all people and we are going to struggle in certain ways just like anybody else. And so I think that pressure that I have to be strong, or if, you know, people before me have gone through way worse, I have to like push through. Like, I think that's one aspect that I think is pretty unique to our history in this country and our journey. Nicole, did you want to add anything additional?
I like where you're going with this. And I think it's also, if we stay in line with that, it's the ways that maybe expressing or mental health has been treated in the Black community. And so almost think about it like being used against people. So you think about like different experiments that have happened and using communities for research studies, or taking the resources, or you talk about it in such a negative way that now you're building up, this is a negative thing, we need to stay away, we can't that mistrust. So I think all of those are like the underlying factors that contribute to that stigma. But then also, if we stay in line with like, you know, this whole strong Black woman, Black men don't cry, things like that, then there's that fear, that thought of you should be able to handle these feelings, you should be able to handle these thoughts, you shouldn't need help from someone else. And then just that fear of being labeled. Like, no one wants to be, even when people come to therapy, that, you know, at the end of the initial session, people will say to me, so am I crazy? I'm like, I would never use that word. Like, you're human. You're having a response. This is depression. That's what it is. Or this is anxiety. That's not crazy. But even that fear in the room is very real. Like, what does that label mean about me? So I think that's part of that stigma that keeps people from, well, all of those things.
I guess I'll also add that I think sometimes it can be this notion of, again, because of some of the reasons Nicole named, the mistrust, right? Like, it's a lot of like, keep it in-house. You don't kind of tell what's going on personally here out there, because everyone out there isn't like looking out for your best interest. Everyone isn't, you know, trying to help. Or if we're talking about labeling, like we already have a ton of labels on us that mean a ton of different things that could cost us our life. So, you know, adding one doesn't seem very beneficial, right, to my journey or trajectory. And I think also, I think the church has come a really long way. The church has come a really long way in being integrative of like mental health needs and prayer, and that you can do both. However, I think in some spaces, the idea may be that you're supposed to just lean on your religious faith when you're having difficulties, because historically the religious faith has been the foundation of many things you've had to, you know, lean on, given, you know, what was available, right, or was accessible to the Black community at that time. So I think those are other things to consider that may look different.
Yeah.
So now, what are the efforts to overcome that?
Yeah.
I mean, first and foremost, I think education is a huge effort, right? And I think the way in which we try to do that is twofold, right? So we have these fact sheets and we have these resources that really exist on our website, and we want to make available for providers, for community members, for just lay people who may just need this resource. But then I think also on the other end, when we look at our social media following, but also just like the content of our social media, we try to make this like larger ideas that we learn in training and as psychologists really digestible and easy to understand for the everyday person. And I think when something is like delivered in smaller pieces and in digestible language, I think you can begin to shift how people think about certain things, or shift how people even understand them, because they're put in a language that they can really relate to and understand and connect with.
Yes, that took work too, to make it, because you have to figure out, what do people understand? What do they respond to? How do we use words and not too many words? Because we were, you know, still in grad school mode, and being able to
Writing
like,
a paper.
I still want to do all the studies.
right, it's like, it's just a caption, just give us what, you know, the main points. So that's really big with us with education. But then the other two things that we do that I'm really proud of, one is we have a national training program. And so we have mentees in both undergrad and graduate school, and we have interns. And so they both get exposure to a team member. We get to provide them with training. We give them webinars and didactics. We have them work on their writing skills. We help them to think about what are the next steps in your education. So if you're an undergraduate student and you're thinking about graduate school, with this last cohort, we did a whole series on how do you find a school? What do you do with your gap year? How do you write a personal statement? Like, these are basic things that will help make that difference of you getting in a graduate program. How do you even decide which graduate programs you want to do? And so we're reinvesting by putting that time into students. So I'm super proud of that, because this last cycle, where last year was our first year, and it was just like, we need mentees. We want to teach other people because we want to diversify and encourage more behavioral health providers. And then this year we like doubled applicants, and it was like, whoa, we need to think about how do we really support students. So that's one thing that we do. We also make it a point to highlight, like I said, all of the mental health providers, just so that if you see someone who looks like you, or you see the different ways that you can seek help or take care of yourself, that maybe you will follow up with those things. Because, you know, just in terms of wellness, people are always asking, how do I cope? Well, if we give you different ways of doing that, if we talk about these things with different people, maybe it starts to feel a little more less scary. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I mean, that's amazing. And when does the cohort run? Like, so you just finished, I'm assuming, this past semester?
Yeah, application deadlines for our program was May 29th. So we're in the review stage.
Okay.
Now.
Yes, and we had like a graduation ceremony for our first cohort like 2 weeks ago. So we do like an academic year with the mentees. So from September through June, we met with them, but then we don't get rid of them. We just give them different roles. So they're still around.
How many people were there in that first year?
The first year we had 3 mentees, and then we had a summer intern,
Hmm.
And then in about was that February or so, someone reached out and wanted to do an internship. So I took her on. And then now we're thinking, and then we have a summer intern again.
Yeah.
And so now we're thinking about even we're starting with college ambassadors and really developing a team, because people are constantly reaching out. So we have these ambassadors. We're oh, we could have a college group, and they can help think about what mental health looks like at that level. And then we've already started talking, because of the number of applicants that we've received. We can't take them all on. So there are ways that we can still get them involved in the monthly webinars or things like that. But eventually, maybe by next year, it'll be ready. Having other people in the field take on mentees so that we can connect them to someone in the field, because we can't
Yourself.
do it.
So the ambassador program, can you just describe that a little bit more? It's college students typically?
Well, we have an ambassador currently who is in Detroit. That's we love Detroit. Shayla, she's our ambassador, and she's really that liaison between us and the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so really being able to make connections with community organizations, and sort of she keeps us in tune with what's happening and what are some different ways that we can connect and collaborate and do programs and things like that. And so based on her success, we were thinking, oh, if we could do the same thing on a college campus and really have someone talk about mental health, or we'll have them help us figure out what that looks like.
Yeah. I also just wanted to comment on the training program, and that I think it also just really represents what has just been fundamental for all of us as founders, and that we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the people before us that really poured into us and really made that effort to just make sure we knew the steps. Because I'm the first person in my family to, go on to obtain a PhD. And as much as my parents wanted to be helpful in parts of this process, they just didn't know. They didn't know, and their friends didn't all know, right? And so I feel like when you don't have that immediate network, your mentorship is so incredibly important. And I always just tell our mentees, people are really appreciative. And I just say, pay it forward. The next person that comes and doesn't know the way, or needs some additional support, or maybe just needs motivation to be keep pushing, that is achievable by someone that looks like you, to be ready to give that to them. So that's just something that I think is near and dear to all of our hearts.
Yes.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. When I started This Is My Brave, I looked to a mentor who'd been doing it 10 years more than I was and said, will you mentor me? Can we talk once a quarter on Zoom or whatever? And she took me on, and we've connected ever since. It's critical in your professional development. So kudos to you guys for launching that. And if there are any college students out there watching and they're interested, can they reach out on your website about the brand ambassador program? Okay, awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's listed, Dr. Cunningham at blackmentalwellness.com. She's our training community ambassador lead, and they can reach out.
So with all that's been going on in our country in the Black Lives Matter movement, I wanted to talk for a minute about that. Has that necessitated a shift in your focus on how you're addressing the needs of your community, would you say?
Has it shifted? I think, well, the thing I love about us is that we've always been really clear on our mission from the very beginning, as it related to the Black community. I think, these types of events as it relates to George Floyd have been happening. And I think that maybe the combination of it being, we're in shutdown because of COVID-19 and these things are happening, maybe it's just more attention being given to it at this time. And so I definitely think it's increased people's need for skills, right, around coping and really trying to really make sure we're addressing racial trauma or addressing aspects of how you cope with those different things. So a lot of the things that we've been participating in more recently have been with that focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that one of the things that we are flexible about is if something happens, the beautiful part about social media is that we can be flexible and provide that information instantly. And so if even when COVID-19 happened, immediately we were okay, we need a resource on the website so that people know how do you cope during these times? Because for so many people, that was, it's our first time living through a pandemic and the response to that. But then with all of the racial injustice that's happening right now, it's sort of like, okay, how do we address this on social media? What are some resources that we can provide people? What are some ways to think about coping? What can we do with our allies? And thinking about how to provide information, we can do that instantly. And then I think in general, like, we don't do therapy under the Black mental wellness umbrella, but for each of us in the therapy room, those conversations, which were there before, but then you think about how these events are impacting people, and it's coming up more often in the therapy room. And so being very intentional about asking that question, because I think sometimes it feels uncomfortable. So you're like, this is a situation where you ask, how are you doing with everything that's happening right now? Yeah. And people are like being impacted by it in
everything.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think that's so important to realize, is that the history is, this isn't new to your community. It's been going on for years and years and years and years. But it's the effect of social media and the news cycle that it's constantly in people's faces. And so I would think that that's probably how you start every session, is how are you doing? And really, and I'm sure coping about how to take time away, because we all want to be tuned into what's going on. Of course, we want to be, activists, and we want to use our voices for good. But at the same time, you do have to take that time to step away to take care of your mental health.
Absolutely. So my advice is always like, if you need to unplug, you can, think about what are the reliable sources you want to look at or read or whatever, because sometimes that can be triggering based on what you read or take in or the comments that you see. Being able to still implement those things that help you feel grounded and feel comforted and safe in your purpose and just in being a person. And then thinking of the ways that you can, and not only thinking of the ways that you can make an impact or that you can be a part of the movement, but also figuring out, when does that work for you? So this is not like, oh, this happened and it's the thing right now. It's like, this is a long-term thing that we all need to be a part of. And so if you're tired right now, take a break, because we're going to need you to tap back in, later down this journey.
Like that. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
like a lot of people who don't, you want to be responsive, you want to be helpful, you want to be engaged to make sure that you're staying on top and understanding the entire thing, right? But that can be exhausting and upsetting and disturbing, and it can really have an impact on you, and sleep
physically and emotionally.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's great that you are able to give permission, because I just think some people need to hear, like, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Take a minute, take a day, take a week, whatever you need. And we'll be here. And, it takes time to discern too, how you can be helpful, how you can contribute to healing and betterment and better policies, better systems, so that's really, I think, so important.
Yeah,
totally agree.
So we would love to hear we've heard a lot about all your different initiatives, which are all so incredible. But what do you see as the future of Black mental wellness? What are your goals for the next 5-10 years?
I feel like we have so many goals, so many. And I get excited because as time goes on, I'm realizing just how many new goals just are developing. And I think what we appreciate the most is like the things that naturally come to us and naturally flow. And so I think that, we have a lot of initiatives around growing our training program, growing the resources that we can provide, and, really just giving our platform to be a space of expression. I really am excited about the Let's Just Be Honest campaign that's happening right now, which is about that like intersection of art and, intersection of art and mental health, and how we use that.
Tell us more about that program.
Yeah, well, let's just be honest. It's actually just a social media campaign where we really wanted to emphasize the power and the healing power of expression, right? I think in a lot of ways, the shirt launch of Authentically Me is us modeling in some ways how you can use expression or creative expression in sharing your stories. And then we feel like people share so much with us on a regular, like either through our DMs or on our messages, and we're so appreciative of that because we feel like it really keeps us connected with our community. But we wanted to be able to do that too, right? And so in this space, we invite people to do that in whatever form feels comfortable. And we did this in collaboration with Nicholas Feemster. He is a musician, artist out of Washington, D.C. area. And so he kind of came to us with his passion around mental health and the arts. And so through his connection and our constant, meeting and collaboration, we were able to launch that. What was this? A week ago, 2 weeks ago now? 2 weeks ago now. So
awesome. Well, that's a perfect tie-in too. We want to stay connected, of course, and we want to mention that we have a new initiative at This Is My Brave. We want to do a This Is My Brave virtual show featuring all stories from the Black community. It's being led by Dr. Tanisha Freeman Foster and Dr. Kyan Connor from the University of South Florida, where they are, putting it out to bring in stories. They'll be leading, and I think it's going to be launching early next year. So if you are watching this episode and you have a desire to share your story through This Is My Brave, through poetry or original music or essay or comedy, we'd love to hear from you. And we'll be sharing info with you guys to get to your network as well. Well, any last pieces of advice you'd like to share with our community? Especially along the lines, we talked a little bit about the need to take breaks and whatnot, but anything that you would point to as something that's been extremely helpful to you in dealing with the pandemic and addressing your mental health?
I think for me, it's been about, so I'm in Washington, D.C. My family, everyone is down in Richmond, Virginia. I do have a lot of friends here. I went to undergrad in D.C., went to grad school here. So I feel like this is my adult home, but there's something about home that always helps you feel grounded and like, I don't know, it's just like a reconnection. Like I think of it like a recharge, like go home and get that extreme love and then go back to the world. And so it's being intentional about making those connections in meaningful ways. And I know that places are starting to open up and people are starting to visit, but I visit different family and getting out and all of that. But it's still a pandemic. And so we have to be careful and minimize that as much as possible. So just being intentional about those connections. And one of the things that my daughter and I did during this time was starting a new tradition with my aunt, where on Sundays we cook Sunday dinner together. Oh. And so she's like the cook of our family. And
do you get on Zoom or FaceTime or?
Get on FaceTime, and I'm like, I probably shouldn't say this part, but in real life, she would never allow us in her kitchen, right? She's like, interesting. She would say, get out, and she wouldn't want to share her recipes. And she's one of those people that like doesn't write anything down. And during this process, food is like another thing that reminds me of home. So we cook different recipes together on Sundays, and I feel like it's created a connection and a meaning and a feeling of closeness, even though we can't be there physically. Mm-hmm. So just being mindful of what are those ways that you can still connect with people or adapt the things that you use. So I like yoga. I'm not, gyms aren't open, so I'll do virtual yoga. And it may not feel the same, but the idea of seeing that same yoga instructor and connecting to those people is important. I'm always big on like, watch those main categories, watch what you eat, especially being home is harder. Watch what you eat, watch, your exercise. So making sure that you're still getting that. If you feel comfortable doing so, get out each day and get some sunlight and vitamin D and be in nature. And then watch your sleep. So a lot of times people may not realize, like when you're dealing with certain stressors, you may either sleep too much or too little, and sort of monitor how are you sleeping and being intentional about getting that healthy number so that you feel your best.
I love those tips, Nicole. Danielle, what do you say? What's your biggest?
I think Nicole gave some great tips. I think some additional things to be thoughtful of is again, the emphasis on the unplugging. I think how much you consume and you don't even realize you're consuming the news, or you might be mindlessly scrolling and that's still kind of consuming more news. I think really being intentional on that intake is important, or at least that's been really important for me. And I appreciate even Nicole, like she doesn't give me all the number updates, it doesn't tell me everything, even if she's seen it. And I'm like, I'm gonna look when I'm ready. I don't want all the updates, because that's been something that can just increase anxiety. I definitely agree with, you know, being connected, but I also think it's important to, in these times, it can be hard to slow down and say, what am I grateful for in this moment? Or what is good about this moment, even though a lot of things are different. And I think for me, it's been, you know, working from home, I kind of can get a little bit more done because I can take my meetings in the morning, go for a run middle of the day, come back, shower, take my sessions in the afternoon. Or, you know, just being able to be more intentional about it's a house party app on, me and my friends all get on and we play games on. Like, that's become more of a routine for us, and we haven't really been routine since college. Mm-hmm. So I think really identifying, while this is a really tough time, it's a different time, are there things that, you know, we can really appreciate about this time and maximize it? But not necessarily you got to have a whole new hustle and do all the things. I think that's pressure too. But also just, you know, resting while acknowledging where our space is that, you know, I can still benefit and enjoy.
I completely agree with you. I think finding gratitude in the little things each day has helped me tremendously, because it just feels like our world's been turned upside down. But when you're able to do, like Nicole said, finding something, some way to connect in a unique way that makes it a bonding thing, and then finding time to really decompress and unplug is just so important in this very unprecedented time. So
I heard new traditions. I love that. Like, you know, that this has spawned new things that probably, hopefully you'll still do these FaceTime. If you still can't get together, you know, with your aunt, that she's sharing her recipes.
Write them down, Nicole.
Yes, in there. You know, it's just nice.
It is. And I've been like taking notes because she doesn't write it down, and I'm like, these are traditions that we don't want to lose.
Yeah.
And so she, just this last week, she's like, you should still remember this from the last time, and I'm like, but you do it. We'll keep it up because it's fun, and you know, she gets excited as well. Like, now she's starting to brag, like, come and look at what she cooked this week. So
that's cool. And neat for your daughter too, to have that connection.
I know, it's like the generational thing. Yeah. And then sometimes we will, my mom will FaceTime so we have my mom on the iPad, my aunt on the phone, and then we're like all on there. So it's been cool.
I love it.
Yeah, such a special thing. Well, ladies, thank you so much for your time. We're so grateful to have this connection, to build upon it, to continue to share the work you're doing, because it's so critically important. And we just want to thank you for your time and get this word out.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Another episode of Brave TV. We'll see you back next week.
All right. Bye.